Alright, so this will be a 24 hours real-time challenge in trying to reach round 100 on every Black Ops 6 zombie map, including beating the Easter egg boss fight on round 100. Now, when I meant by real-time, it means that even when you're a pause or you gotta go use the bathroom or take an eating break, the time is still ticking. As you guys can see, I have two timers on the left screen, with the purple timer being the 24 hours real-time and the red timer being the in-game timer for the individual map. This challenge will be done in chronological order, 7 round 100s in total, since we will have to run Reckoning to 100 twice, one for Sam and the other for Richtofen. Gobblegums except Wunderbar and Timeouts will be allowed for this run. That being said, Liberty is the first map on the challenge. The last time that I really attempted many of these Easter eggs were way back when I achieved round 999, so I needed a chat to help me guide with the steps. The first step was simply to open up to the church to pack a punch. I decided not to use any perkaholic, hidden power, or wall power for setting up on this map since I didn't really have an excessive amount left, so I wanted to save them for the other map down the challenge. So apparently I was told that if you carry the canister and walk backwards, your movement speed is faster. Not sure if this was actually true. When I dropped the canister at the first trap, I mistakenly killed the Abomination thinking that the first elite was always a Mangler, because I've always had Mangler as the first and Abomination as the second for some reason. Reattempted this step again and I had to deal with 2 Abominations this time. I guess that was my punishment. Now onto the second trap. I got a Mangler elite spawning with the name Eric had. I'm always curious how Treyarch comes up with these most random names. I mean, at this point, might as well put a wig on a Mangler's head and name it Erica, right? Took him out fairly easily, then deposited it back at the church. Now we are pretty much set up for the Easter egg boss fight, but first we need to reach round 100. I didn't consider setting up Etherella in this game because with the mutant injections for the third phase, you really don't need Etherella and you'll be wasting time trying to get it set up. Moving on to the high round strategy, typically the bank strat is the fastest on this map, but since I've never really done it before, I decided to just stick with the OG rooftop strat, but you have to make sure the vertical zipline is closed. I like to sit right by the zipline and camp with the jet gun by tap bursting it, and whenever my energy mine is ready, I place them right in front of me. The reason for running energy mine is that it helps takes care of the elites and speeds up the game. Then shout out to Lost Fueling from the chat who gave me the recommendation in trying out Mr. Peaks over energy mine. This new field upgrade is low-key OP because it can destroy the Abomination in like 5 seconds. In fact, while it's activated, you can still charge up the progress. Augments I'm running for Peaks are Apex Hunter and Party Animal. Often at times when I do these high rounds, chat will always ask me, Insomnia, do you ever get bored hearing the same operator quotes over and over again? To a surprise, I actually never once been bothered, nor have I really noticed them except to one noise, the Mangler moans. At round 99, I swapped to Ether Stroud to prepare for the round 100 boss fight. Not gonna lie, but I find it pretty disappointing that the most played Black Ops 6 zombie map being Liberty Falls as one of the most lame boss fights ever. Like, it's not even a boss fight, but rather an Abomination dipped in ketchup. So to begin the boss fight, I made sure my melee weapon was triple pack and legendary rarity because I recall it being extremely OP against Manglers back when I did on my 999 run. Let's test it out again. Like, holy, that is some insane damage. Literally 2 to 3 melee swipes and the Manglers are gone. In between phases, I like to kind of just chill over by Pack-a-Punch and camp with the jet gun. Then once the Abomination spawns in for the final phase, I simply just use my mutant. And that pretty much wraps up Liberty Falls at 2 hours and 10 minutes. Moving on to the second map, we have Terminus. This map is by far one of my least favorite map on BO6. Not the worst map though, we'll eventually get to that as we go down the challenge, but I'm pretty sure you can kind of already guess which map that might be. Now, there's actually quite a bit of steps that we gotta do in order to prepare for Patient 13 boss fight. Turning on Pack-a-Punch and acquiring the Beam Smasher Wonder Weapon. Every time I do this step, I can never seem to solve it off my head, but I'm always happy someone from the chat is able to help me get the free answer. Saves me from getting robbed, I think 6,000 from the dude in spawn. Then after that, we gotta go around the islands to get the kills. Now, this is kind of the reason why I dislike this map very much, is that they made this map so large, yet more than 90% of the map just feels like a waste of space. Like, once you acquire the Beam Smasher, there's like no purpose in returning to any of the islands. This is kind of random, but if any of you who are watching this video and is a horror movie fan, there's a movie called Together that I watched recently, and it was actually just released not too long ago, but it literally has an amalgam in that movie. Just something that I recommend if if you don't mind a bit of horror. Now it's time to fight Nathan. I made sure I had the death machine locked and loaded. This thing literally just shreds him in like 5 seconds. One really cool shortcut when doing this Easter egg is that you can actually skip the lockdown by throwing a shock charge at the ladder once you pick up the canister. Not gonna lie, but this final step is kind of tedious if you're doing this by yourself, since not only do you have to hack the 3 floating devices on the water, but also deactivate the 3 bombs. Now that the boss is ready to go, I still needed some more points before we could start the high round strategy. I tend to like to chill downstairs near Pack-a-Punch, but I made sure that Pack was actually on the upper level. That way you can actually camp here fairly easy. The high round strategy actually involves camping the bunker of the ship. I think this strat is probably the hardest to do on BO6, but luckily with the introduction of double tap,
someone give me a 10-gallon hat.
it actually made the strat easier to manage. The tricky thing about this strat is that you're not actually killing the zombies by shooting them directly, but rather using your Beam Smasher's reload ability to create a powerful explosion to kill them. The 2 key augments that you would need here are Dead Again and Critical Eye. In case if you did not realize, but after Reckoning drop, I think this was intentional, but they made mutant injections have a very high chance to fail when either you are trapped in a corner or surrounded by zombies. Kinda like how raindrops doesn't work if there isn't enough room. But this switches things up a little bit here because it's not safe anymore to hold an injection while doing this strat, so I recommend a chopper gunner instead. Now it's time for boss fight. I thought about using stims, but I decided to go in with Casimir's as it helps with taking out hordes and dealing with amalgam. The first phase for Patient 13 is fairly quite easy, as you can simply just hide behind the boulders and shoot his weak spot. The GS45 works extremely well against this boss, as you don't really need to aim it since the splash damage will hit the weak spot. The second phase gets a little more intense, so that's when the Casimir's comes in handy. I think Patient 13 actually has an ammo mod weakness, but I believe it changes depending on the phase, so I'm not actually sure which ammo mod would be the most ideal, but I tend to like Lightman as it helps with healing and is super effective against amalgam. Then on the final phase, always pop an injection and aim for his head. Let me know if you guys rather prefer chopper gunners or injections against this boss, because I remember when this map first launched, there was a huge debate which is more ideal. That being said, this concludes Terminus at 2 hours and 23 minutes. Moving on to the third map on the list, we have Citadelle Des Morts. This map is probably one of my favorite on BO6, as it kind of gives me the Rise and Drag vibes from BO3. I don't know if it's something with me loving zombies and castles, since I love to play Resident Evil games, specifically the 4th one. This is the one and only map where you actually have to spawn in with the Sigma launcher, as you will need it for the high round strategy. I also decided to use Perkaholic wall power and hidden power to help speed up with the setup, since there is tons of Easter egg steps that we gotta do, and there isn't actually a PhD perk machine until the Wonder Fist spawns in. And yes, I am aware that the bartender side EE gives you a free PhD, but I've never bothered learning how to do it. Just like the other maps, first we gotta get access to Pack-a-Punch. I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but my first impression of this red ring of trap really reminds me of Ring of Fire from Cold War. Here I took the slide down for the Raven, and I gotta say, oh my goodness, never try to shoot this thing with your GS45, because it's literally impossible to hit. I forgot what you actually get, but apparently there is a side EE where if you catapult out from this cannon 100 times, you get something. Like, who in the world was bored out of their mind to figure this out? Props to you. I think out of the 4 swords, the Raven one is probably my least favorite one to craft. Like, is it even possible to enter the symbols in without looking it up? Let me know in the comment section below which sword you guys think is the worst to craft. Once the EE is set up, make your way down to Pack-a-Punch to start the high round strategy, and make sure the door that leads to the water room is closed. This is where the Sigma comes in handy, because by activating the trap, you can literally just spam this thing left to right. I know it makes it extremely difficult to see where the zombies are coming from, and this is why the minimap is quite clutch here. There's an option to make the side shape into a square rather than a circle, so that way you can actually see more. Then once the trap runs off, make your way over to Quick Revive and do the same for this trap. As the rounds go higher, it does get a little sketchy while doing this strat, so that's why some people would prefer using Frenzy Guard, but I do feel more comfortable with using Ether Shroud. So I actually learned something new from this run. Someone from my chat recommended me to try out the War Machine over the Sigma, because apparently when the trap is on, you don't lose any ammo from the War Machine. I was actually so shocked how good this thing was, and what's even better is you can actually see now. For preparation for Guardian boss fight, I bought the XM4 off the wall and decided going with the Lion Sword and Running Stick. I typically love Casimir's, but they just don't work that well for this boss fight arena. At the start of the battle, I popped an Ether Shroud right off the bat with an Augment Espresso from Melee Macchiato. You can easily break its armor armor by swinging your sword. I decided to focus on breaking both his leg armors, then kept my distance away and emptied my XM4. One tip of advice for this boss is always run in one direction. And that is first phase done. Now we gotta work on charging up the second shroud. Then once second phase begins, I popped my shroud again and went after both his armors on his arm. Do the same thing again, keep your distance away and keep running in the same direction. Now we enter the idle phase again. I quickly grab the electric incantation as there will be an amalgam and this can instant kill it. I also decided to pop his shield up gun for this final phase just for safety. I popped the shroud once again, trying to break his armor on his chest, but for some reason it wasn't really effective. He stomps at me right away. I decided to pop an injection to avoid any risk. He launches me flying in mid-air, but luckily we are invincible in this form. Then we finally finish him off with my XM4 and that wraps up Citadel at 2 hours and 4 minutes. Launching to the fourth map, we have Tomb. If you made the guess back on Terminus that Tomb might have been my least favorite map, well, you got that right. This map is just so dull that it puts you to sleep. Maybe that's why it was named as the Tomb. For weapon of choice, I decided to go with the Maelstrom shotgun since explosive weapons don't do any damage on this boss fight. Welcome to Revelations. Just kidding. Not gonna lie, they're putting so much effort in making this area look cool, but yet it just doesn't feel like the center point of this map. And what I mean by that is it doesn't feel like a popular area to be around. Like for instance on Liberty, rooftop area will be classified as the center point, Terminus being the entire main island as the center point, and Citadel basically the whole map felt like the center point. Like to me, every time that I gotta teleport just to get here makes it actually annoying to come here. On round 16, I tried looking for one of the EE parts that the mimics would drop, but couldn't find it anywhere for multiple rounds. Pretty sure the game glitched, decided to save and quit, load it back into the game, and luckily we managed to fix the issue. Here we are trying to craft the ice staff. These lockdowns sure can be quite hectic on this map. Got the staff, now we gotta do probably the most annoying step of this Easter egg, which is to shoot 3 crystal lanterns within 10 seconds. Now it's time for the lockdown to upgrade the staff. I low-key kind of wish they added the other 3 staff variants onto this map to add in more replayability. For some reason, I literally failed this order step like 3 to 4 times because apparently I was killing the bugs too fast with my staff and there just wasn't enough ores being dropped. Once I had the EE ready to go, I made my way over to stam area for the high round strategy. This strat honestly is pretty brain dead as you're literally just staring at the wall and doing constant charge shots. You'll also be using energy mine here with the augments turret and frequency boost to help take care of mimics and amalgam. A good tip of advice here is to have tomahawks on you as they are also good against elites. One thing that annoys the heck out of me on this map is that literally at the end of every single round there are always mimics hiding and it's frustrating seeing my energy mines just shooting at air. Luckily this map has one of the fastest strategies for high round, and when I meant by fastest I mean it.
Super duper duper long. I don't think.
I am gonna talk over it though. I don't know about you though.
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do as well. It's just honestly.
Yeah.
Like just talk over it the whole time, pretty much.
Yeah. Bro, how long was that round? Like 5 second vermin round? Like that vermin round was literally less than 10 seconds. It makes me so angry that back when I played Liberty on launch, the vermin rounds could take up to over an hour. Because even at 999, I think vermin rounds on this map are only about a minute. Now it's time to battle the Sentinel artifact. For the first 4 phases, you can simply just prone flat down and do constant charge shots from your ice staff. Once the artifact is vulnerable, pull out your Maelstrom and it literally just deletes them in seconds. Do the same for the second and third phase and you should be able to double KO both artifacts. Then for the 4th phase, luckily you just need to target 1. I kind of wish they made it where it's not possible to prone like this because it literally makes the first half of the boss fight quite boring, I must say. Once the 5th phase begins, things starts to get a little more intense. This is where you gotta run in circles and have your ice staff out to slow down the enemy with the artifact. Once it's vulnerable, clear him out with your Maelstrom. This gun is just too OP in my opinion against this boss, especially the fact that they nerfed this boss electric stun attack, added double tap into the game, and yet did not scale up the health of any of the bosses in prior to Shatter Veil. On the 6th phase, we gotta deal with the Doppelgas artifact. At first sight, I thought his name was Hiroshima. Like, that would have been wild. Took him out without a sweat and destroyed the artifact. 7th phase can be quite difficult since not only are we dealing with the Mimic artifact, but amalgams and multiple Doppelgas spawns in. Had to pop an Ether Shroud to take out this one as there was just too much stuff going on. 8th phase is the last elite, which is the Amalgam. An easy way to cheese this phase is to use your mutant and right before he dies, inject out of it. But I just decided to do it the normal way, killed him slowly, pop an ether, and took out the artifact. Moving on to the final stage, I actually think this phase is quite a big disappointment because it literally feels easier than phase 4. I think it would have been cooler if they made all those artifacts spin around in different areas and you had to fight the final form in the middle. I managed to finish them off quite quickly and it made me think my game actually froze or glitched out because the health bar wasn't going away, but apparently it was because I killed him a little too fast. And this wraps up Tomb at 2 hours and 3 minutes, being the fastest 100 out of the 4 maps so far. Moving on to the 5th map, Shattervale. At this point, we are already more than halfway finished the challenge, but I gotta be honest, I was quite nervous for this boss fight because at round 100 onwards, there is a hardcore version of the fight. And I've only beat it once in hardcore back during my 999 run, so it was already a little while ago. But I gotta say, this is probably my favorite map on BO6 in terms of map design, high round strategy, and a badass boss fight. I think we can all agree that trying to taunt the Abomination is probably the worst EE step in BO6. This middle statue kind of reminds me of the Red Worm from MW3 Zombies. Would have been really cool if we fought that instead of the 3 double gas elites. This is another EE step that I really dislike because even on solo, you still have to protect all 4 plants and they get destroyed so easily. I started off with the plasma variant of the Mark II. I would say this is my least favorite variant out of the 3 because it just shoots too slow even with double tap on. Luckily, lockdowns are pretty chill and we were able to take out the amalgam easily. Shotgun variant was the next that I pursued. Let me know in the comments below which is your favorite variant because I probably picked the blue one. You might have not noticed yet, but we're on round 40 already and I still haven't fully set up the EE. The reason for this was because I had Ravage on the whole time and the rounds just kept ending. This actually made setting up the EE pretty tedious because guns were starting to get weak. Pop the mutant for the Disciple lockdown because I was too broke to buy ammo. The last thing we need here is the Wonder Waffle, and in order to get it, we have to shoot these mysterious orb at 3 different locations, but it does get quite tedious when you're doing it in the middle of a round and with Ravage on. I legit had to train outside the mansion for a couple rounds to make back points because I wasn't even triple pack of my GS45 and the shotgun variant didn't seem that effective on the orb. Then on round 47, we finally completed the 7, was granted the Wonder Waffle. Now we're ready for the high round strategy. Make your way over to the distillery room. In case if you are wondering what happened to the blue variant lockdown, well, unfortunately, in order to do this strategy, you cannot do that specific lockdown because otherwise it will open up the secret room and mess up the spawns in here. That being said, we have to wait until a few rounds before the boss fight. Here was my very first time attempting this strategy since I did the Doppelgas room strat on my 999 game. But you basically just sit on this barrel with Frenzy Guard and shoot at the 3 spawns. In comparison to playing on PC, this strategy is harder to do on controller since you have to constantly use the analog stick to turn and aim. Once the Disciple spawns in, simply just throw a Casimir and finish him off with the blue variant Mark II. For Toxic Zombie rounds, there will only be 2 spawns, so you can throw a Casimir at one window and shoot at the other. In the higher rounds, you can use mutants to get through. On round 96, I had to do the Brain Rot step with an AK and luckily it didn't take too long. This allowed me to do the final lockdown before a boss fight. I went back to my old strat and did the last few rounds here since the distillery room is no longer doable with the blue painting open. On round 98, I saved and quit to change my Juggernaut Augment to Probiotics since that extra 50 health will come in huge clutch. For gun wise, I wasn't 100% certain on whether I should have ran Shield Up or Power Keg, but I ended up picking Shield Up and had Raindrops and Perkaholic as my other 2. Here, I nearly started the boss fight with the mutant in my hand, but luckily someone from my chat was screaming Chopper Gunner, so thank god I was able to swap it last second. First phase of the boss fight ain't terrible as he only walks around, so you'll easily be able to outrun him. This is honestly such an amazing boss fight because it gives me Jurassic Park vibe. Because this was the hardcore version, I completely forgot that sometime in second phase, he will become enraged. And this is where you gotta keep your distance away because he will wreck your shield. Whenever he jumps onto the cliff, I would swap to my waffle to try to regain back my shroud. One extremely useful tip here is whenever he chomps at you up close, move the other direction because if you go the same way, you will go down. On the final phase, I still had 1 shroud and all my gums, so we were in pretty good shape. I decided to pop a shield up just for safety. Had another close call here, quickly ran the other way and popped my stick. I find it so satisfying shooting T-Rex crit spots with the Mark II. And finally spraying with all of my life, we beat the T-Rex boss fight on hardcore mode in 2 hours and 21 minutes. Finally moving on to the last map, the Reckoning. At this point in the challenge, I was a little tired, but we still had to run up Reckoning to round 100 twice for the 2 boss fights, so even thinking about that was a torture. Failing a boss fight at this point would be a disaster as well, as that means you gotta do the entire round 100 again, and that's another additional 2 to 3 hours. I think overall, they designed this map quite well. Definitely gives a Die Rise vibe. I think whenever I ask someone, do you like Die Rise, they would either say they really like it or they really dislike it. It's not a map where someone would think it's alright. Since we are going to be fighting Sam first, I decided to spawn in with the Maelstrom shotgun once again. And this sharpshooter side Easter egg is probably the best thing they have added to this game because honestly, getting a free legendary tool after round 20 is huge. I think Uber Claws is the most annoying and OP elite they have added in BO6. The fact that the purple shockwave they shoot out can literally aimbot at you and even when you're in Shroud is just ridiculous. And yippee, we got the free legendary tool. Before we start the high round strategy, we have to make sure we get the green variant of the Gorgle fact. I have no idea why they even bother adding in the blue variant because it's literally the same weapon but worse. Here's my first time attempting this high round strategy and it's basically a one window strat. Just a heads up, as of season 5 reload, this strategy has been patched. In order to do this strat, you would have to run energy mine and stand right in front of the elevator. You would aim at the window and do charge shots from your Gorgle facts. This strat is a little tricky to get used to at first, so the way I'm doing it isn't as smooth. If an Uber spawns in, just simply shock charge it and pull out your death machine. If you get overrun, you can either take the elevator down to spawn and back up, or you can drop down this hole, buy armor, and take the elevator back up. For special rounds, take the portal from spawn and stay by this window right next to elemental popper. One tip of advice is if you drop down while holding a leaf though, it won't pull out your parachute. For the last few rounds, I decided to switch back to my other strat that I did on my 999. Simply just camp here in the PhD alley with Frostpass and the Gorgle fact. Now that we're ready for Slam fight, I'm going to be running Frenzy Guard with Stims and have a mutant on for safety. I kinda wish they had the around 100 plus hardcore version on every boss fight and not just the last 3. So the moment you see Sam's butt, you can start dealing damage. Since this is hardcore version, when she spins like a Beyblade, she would not remain in one spot. Let it rip again. Usually whenever I get the critical Sam kill trial one, I would always fail. But I somehow ended up failing the kill zombie challenge too, which was kind of embarrassing. Luckily the group punishment isn't that terrible. So I recently learned something new from watching another streamer gameplay. So apparently when Sam launches you up in the air, you can instant down by landing outside the arena. Let it rip again. Guiltless Lord. Sam seems to love this attack so much on hardcore mode. Trial 2 was to remain inside the area, but sadly I also failed this challenge. Then near the end of phase 3, she finally launched her first laser beam attack, and I decided to go all in by popping Frenzy to try to finish her off, but we were so close. Then finally after another beam, we managed to finish her off smoothly at 2 hours and 40 minutes. Moving on to the final boss fight for the challenge, we have Richtofen, which is also considered in the community to be one of the hardest EE boss fight in COD Zombies history. Now because this is just another rerun to round 100 on Reckoning, we're just going to fast forward right to the boss. For this fight, I decided to load in with a GPR assault rifle as my weapon of choice, Stims, and Death Machine. Right before the boss fight, you can buy and swap to try to have an extra Death Machine on the platform. I gotta be honest, I was also quite nervous for this fight as I've only completed the hardcore Richtofen once. For the first phase, I simply just empty out my first Death Machine to one of his shoulder pads and picked up the other Death Machine, which I'll be saving that for the end of phase 1. I think the best way to deal with this phase is to try to stay near the edge of the arena and move in one direction only. Don't need to put in too much effort on the other Ubers since they would just respawn if you took them out. At around 40% health, the other Ubers elites will spawn in, but the best advice here is to try to get Richtofen down to 25% health before killing everything else because that way they won't respawn again. And this is when the second Death Machine will come in handy. Prepare for Richtofen's final form. The moment the first phase ends, I immediately take cover. Best advice here is to try to avoid him for 10 seconds and he will take off. Then when he drops back down, I pop my shroud right away and empty out my GPR. Pop my second shroud right after the first ended, and for some reason they glitched out my character where I was unable to aim. So that was very unfortunate as I barely did any damage on the second shroud. Had an extremely close call here and I rushed for cover ASAP. Pop my C4 here to get the free full power. I had a lot of people curious, how do you still have the C4 when it shows that you're holding Suntex in your inventory? Well, apparently after planting your C4, you can still hold other lethals. You just want to make sure you don't accidentally trigger the C4 explosion. I was trying to bait him to fly away again, but he got stubborn and got me down to no armor, so I had no choice but to shroud, and luckily that was just enough to get him off his first phase. Now is our chance to regain back more armor plate and to build back our shroud. I decided to pop my power keg as well, so that way I had one prepared already. I find the best way to gain back shroud is to charge shroud your Gorgle fact. Just in time, we got 2 shrouds ready. He lands for a second time and I immediately shrouded and locked in with my weapon. I ended up doing a crazy amount of damage on just this one shroud and it forced him to go into his final phase. Now rinse and repeat, we go back to trying to build back our shroud. At this point, I was feeling pretty confident and I still had 1 shroud left and my raindrop. Comes back down for the final time, I shroud and empty out my bullets. Popped another shroud right away, giving him no time to shoot at me, and we finally crushed this boss fight at 2 hours and 48 minutes. Summing this entire challenge up, we have completed it at a total of 18 hours and 10 minutes of real time, leaving us with a spare of 6 hours left. I as well summed up the total game time for the 7 maps and it came to 15 hours and 49 minutes. I myself had a great time giving this challenge a go, but most importantly, I hope you guys guys enjoyed this challenge. Comment down below which is your favorite Easter egg boss fight, and I'd love to know your reasoning behind it and why you picked that. If you enjoyed watching epic challenges like this, make sure you click that like button and subscribe, as we are approaching Black Ops 7 Zombies real soon. Peace.